I was able to buy this BMW E30 for only $2,000 because it has a lot of problems, including a hard start. So today, I'm installing a set of new fuel injectors to fix the problem. I also have 2 new fuel pumps and a new fuel filter to do a complete overhaul of the entire fueling system. So the fuel rail and fuel injectors are under the intake manifold here. These brackets, some of these lines, and potentially the valve cover has to come off in order to remove the fuel injectors and the fuel rail. I'm going to start by removing the 2 brackets attached to the valve cover. Then I can move on to disconnecting any fuel lines that are in the way of removing the fuel rail. Next, I'm disconnecting all the signal wires from the injectors. The fuel rail is held on by 4 bolts. They're hard to show on video because of how dark it is under the intake manifold, but once you take a look under there with a flashlight, it's very obvious which ones they are and it's pretty easy to remove them. In the end, I had to remove the valve cover because there wasn't enough clearance to remove the fuel rail with the injectors because the valve cover was in the way. Alright, so I've got the valve cover off, got all the fuel injector connectors removed from the injectors. The fuel rail and fuel injectors are still pretty tight in there. I don't know if they need a little pressure to come up, so I'm just going to try to wiggle it and massage it out of the cylinder head. I'm going to spray a little WD-40 onto the fuel injector seats in hopes that that'll loosen it up and get it to come out. I did finally get the fuel injectors free, so I did 2 things. I wiggled them left to right to kind of free them up, and I took this pry tool and then I leveraged it here against the head, and then on the tab there I just kind of pried up, and that seemed to have freed the fuel injectors. Let's see on this side, I'll do the same thing. Okay, yeah, that seems to have worked. Alright, I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but these fuel injectors have been so stubborn, and I honestly couldn't even find a good tutorial online. Nobody who does fuel injectors shows this part, so that's how I got it free. Alright, here's the fuel rail. Now all I have to do is remove these old fuel injectors and replace them with the new ones. Alright, and these injectors look like they have little retaining clips on the back, so I'm just going to use the screwdriver to pop them off. Replacing the injectors on the rail is going to be pretty straightforward. Just going to pop off the old ones and install the new ones in its place. If you notice, I'm also putting a little bit of grease around the O-ring where the injector meets the fuel rail just so it installs smoothly. Alright, now all my new injectors are installed on the rail. Now all I have to do is reverse the process of taking them out and reinstall my injector and rail. But sometimes reinstallation can be tricky, so hopefully I don't run into any problems. Also, before I reinstall the fuel rail, I kind of want to show some of the old injectors. Some of them are pretty gunked up here in the nozzle, which may explain the hard start issue. Possibly these are salvageable if I cleaned them up, but since I have the new ones here, I'm not going to bother cleaning these guys up, and I'm just going to install the new ones. Now that the fuel rail has all new injectors, all I have to do is install it back into the car in the exact reverse order of how I pulled it out. Alright, the fuel rail is back in place. You just kind of want to adjust your fuel injectors here to line up with the hole, and then once they're all lined up, just a little downward pressure on the fuel rail will pop them into place, and now I can start to reassemble everything. Alright, I've got everything hooked back up, so hopefully now when I turn the key, the car will start with no problem. Oh, I hear fuel. Oh, I got a leak.
A few minutes later.
Alright, it's probably taking a few starts because there's no fuel in the fuel line yet. Oh no. So next up, I'm going to try installing new fuel pumps and a new fuel filter. Because this car is a 1986 325 ES, it actually has 2 fuel pumps, one in the tank and one underneath the car that's in line. I temporarily plugged in a fuel gauge under the hood here, and the car is running around 25 psi, and the factory manual says it should be running closer to 36 psi. Also, I started the car about half an hour ago, and the pressure hasn't changed much, so I don't think there's a flowback issue. The first step is going to be removing this back seat so I can access the in-tank pump. There we go. Alright, let me make sure the seat is popped on the passenger side. Nope. There we go, now it's free. In this video, you're probably also going to hear a bunch of jets flying overhead because there's an air show today. Probably not the best day to be filming, but is what it is. Because these Sparco seats are kind of a pain to take out, I just flipped the back seat up instead of taking it all the way out. If I flip open this little carpet thing, that's the access panel right here to the fuel pump. All right, first step is to take off this cover here. All right, and right here, this is your fuel pump. I just have to disconnect these lines and this connector, and the pump should pull right up. These little 8mm nuts, these 4 also have to be removed. Have a bucket ready when removing the fuel level indicator so that it doesn't spill fuel in your car. Next, I'm disconnecting the fuel feed lines and the return lines. Alright, this pump seems a little crusted in here. I'm gonna just spray some WD-40, help loosen it up. Just tap this with a hammer, maybe it'll come loose. Yep, there we go. Let's see if this thing will come out now. The fuel pump assembly is a little tricky to get out. You need to turn it and angle it in order to get it removed. So just be patient and keep turning it and twisting it as you pull it out. I was a little forceful when I pulled mine out, so don't be afraid to get a little rough with it. Alright, here's the old pump. Got a little mangled coming out of the car, but that's okay. I'm not going to reuse any of this. I actually just bought a replacement that has the full hanger and pump and everything attached. I actually couldn't find just the pump, but that's okay. This assembly actually wasn't too expensive. So now I'm just gonna drop it in pretty much in the reverse of the way that I pulled it out. All right, now it's time to drop in the new filter. For some strange reason, the new pump won't seal properly into place, and I just figured out why. I was wondering why this wouldn't seal properly. There's a gasket. So I just need to slip this on and everything should start to fit nicely. Let's try this again. Yep, that gasket did the trick. Everything is sealing nice. Now I just have to reconnect everything and the pump will be installed. Alright, the interior pump is all installed and the seat's back in now. So let's move on to the inline pump, which is located right here underneath the car. So I'm going to jack it up and we'll install the next pump. Alright. Right here, that's the inline pump. So what has to be disconnected is this fuel line here. Disconnect this nut here to remove this line from the bracket. You can disconnect the fuel line connection here, and you'll have to disconnect here. And then on the bracket up here, it's really hard to see, it's kind of dark, but there's 2 nuts on each side that have to be disconnected, and then this will all come out. Oh, and the positive and negative terminals for the electrical here. All right, I'm gonna disconnect this line first, let some of the fuel out, hopefully let it drain. So here I'm trying to disconnect the electrical connectors. They're being held on by a 7mm nut. Removing the bracket from the car to lower the pump a little bit seems to make it a little easier to take off this other electrical connector. Oh! What was that? This boot is a little more stubborn though. I'm also gonna mark the positive boot just so when I put it back together I know which one, because this side of the pump says positive. Alright, there's the old fuel pump. So now I'll just get the new pump out and pretty much replace this for the new one. It goes this way. So that's about how far up I need to scoot this holding ring, this rubber ring, to match the old filter. Throw a little lube on there. Alright, so the new pump is installed in the bracket, so now I'll put the bracket back in the car and reconnect all the lines and electrical connectors. So last up in the fuel system, I'm going to replace the fuel filter. The filter is located here in the engine bay. Some of these E30s have a second fuel filter over by the pump, but this one obviously doesn't have that. There's the filter right there. It's not really visible, but there's a clamp that goes around the fuel filter. So I just have to remove the clamp that goes around the filter, and then I have to disconnect the inlet and then the outlet underneath and swap in the new filter, and that's pretty much it. All right, first up, I'm gonna remove the clamp that holds the filter. All right, now go underneath the car. All right, there's the underside of the filter. The hose connected to the bottom of the filter is too difficult to reach, so I'm actually just gonna disconnect here and pull this all the way up through the clamp, and then I'll swap over this line once I have the filter out of the car. All right, I'm having trouble disconnecting this top line from the filter, which runs from here all the way to the other side of the motor. So that line feeds out, pops out here and feeds into the fuel rail. So I'm just gonna disconnect it from here and pull the line through. God damn it. This fucking brake is right in the way. So the brake master cylinder is in the way of pulling up the filter out of the engine bay. I probably could disconnect a few more things and get it out properly, but my back's hurting, so I'm just gonna manhandle it until it comes out. I feel like I've already wasted way too much time on just doing this one filter. All right, it's the next day. I got a little lightheaded yesterday from all the fuel fumes. So we have the filter out now. I have the new filter here. So all I have to do is swap this line over to the new filter, and then I actually bought a new line to replace this one because I mangled this line pretty bad when I was taking it out of the car. All right, the new filter's all set up. The line's back on it, so all that's left to do is put it back in the car. All right, filter's back in. Let's give the car a little start and see what happens. So I am expecting the first start to be a little tough just because the fuel pump actually doesn't prime when the key is on. It's only when cranking. It'll take a second for the whole system to get filled with fuel. The car's warmed up now, and as you can hear, she's purring like a kitten. It's not having any of the stumbling that it was having before. So I think replacing the fuel pumps did the uh-oh. Might have spoken too early. Oh, false alarm. There's a little piece of plastic here that hits the, from the shroud that hits the fan sometimes. Just gotta push that thing back. But anyways, it seems that changing the fuel pumps fixed my issue, so thank you so much for watching. And if this video helped you out, I'd appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up. If you wanna see more E30 content, go ahead and hit subscribe.